We have a couple of episodes from the northern tip of Scotland exploring ancient sites. Last time was the first for us in the Shetland Isles, which had been full of nice surprises. But we were pulling out of Shetland by 5:30 in the evening. A bit of a blur getting off the boat. It was late, but thankfully there was a bus to save me a sizable walk from the large inter-island ferry terminal and to the streets of Kirkwall, where I was staying in a youth hostel. It was fine for accommodation, definitely grateful for the shut-eye. In fact, so much so I neglected to get any shots from this first night. Well, got up pretty promptly the next morning and wandered into a subdued Kirkwall. Thankfully, a familiar coffee spot was open pretty early. Archive is pretty great, so this was a strong start. Followers of the channel for a while may know that this is not our first time in Orkney. We have, in fact, 2 episodes from back in 2020, but don't get too excited. Back, what seems like a long time ago now, these were the first time we had episodes where our write-up wasn't 100% positive. It was mainly headaches with travel links getting there, and these became an object lesson that you can't count on people to actually listen to the words that come out of your mouth. Rather, there will always be a section of the population who watch for slightly fewer than 45 seconds, hear a bad faith parody of what they think you're saying, and then write a 6-paragraph antithesis to this version of you that they think they're responding to. And it was pure bad luck that pretty much all the great stuff I wanted to gush and enthuse about last time happened to fall in the second episode. A second episode far fewer people saw because they'd already written an angry reply to our first episode. To spoil the conclusion a little here, it became apparent putting the 2 trips side by side just how much difference the pandemic had made. Granted, Orkney is not exactly Istanbul in terms of busyness, but the damp blanket the plague had dropped on the island was now, of course, nowhere to be found, and my goodness, the mood was lighter everywhere you went. Well, to start off, and this has to be one of the funniest experiences I've had with an ancient site. So I found out during the planning phase of this trip that to see this place, I had to go to a shop called Judith Glue, which opens at 9. I just popped in to see the cathedral first, as, you know, it also opens at 9. I mean, come on, no one's that keen. So this was, in fact, the first time inside Kirkwall Cathedral. It was closed during the pandemic and all, and this is honestly one of the most remarkable Romanesque buildings in the country. Not just because of its gorgeous spans, but the red sandstone used for the interior bathes this whole structure in a rosy glow. And so, after a few moments of awe in the cathedral, went in the shop and asked for the keys, and someone had literally just been in and got them. In fact, so recently, the lady took me out to the pavement and pointed to the guy who was walking away. Now, social norms deterred me from running after this guy, arms waving like, "Stop!" But I'm not sure I picked the best alternative either. You know, tailing him at a bit of a distance, and like, hang on a second. I am following a guy, trying to not seem weird by getting close, to get hold of a key, to visit a secret 2,000-year-old underground chamber. This is an Assassin's Creed game. It has to be. Taking note that the police appear to be right next door to the Masonic Hall. About the time I realised my current strategy was not a winning one and I should just introduce myself. He then climbed into a car and I lost him. Now, I knew this place was a brisk 20-odd minutes from the centre of Kirkwall, so light jog to get there promptly. And here for, let's be honest, what looks like the least likely place to find anything remotely ancient. Well, when I got there, the door was open. I didn't want to jump scare the guy by bursting down there, so waited a moment for him to come up and asked if I could take custody of the keys. Well, into the Chamber of Secrets, I guess. While this is loosely known as the Grain Earth House, the technical name for this type of structure is a souterrain. It's around 2,000 years old, though it could be even a little bit older. Also, I can see why characters in video games move so slowly when crouched. You know, while not at all clear on the purposes of these passages, I'd like to throw my own theory into the ring. Ritual thigh workout. You see, the ground was partially flooded, meaning you really didn't want to get on your knees, but the ceiling is a little over a metre off the ground, meaning you have to do this sort of CrossFit exercise, which really burns after just 30 seconds. Anyway, Grain Earth House done. Of course, I did contemplate throwing the keys into the ocean so the secret is never revealed. Nah, it's alright. So, back to Kirkwall, got an espresso on my way out of Judith Glue, having dropped the keys back and updating my quest markers. Next job. Now, These days I have a driving license, but at this stage I did not. Just to mention, by the way, while there are hire car places on Orkney, I've seen lots of stories from people who tried to get one and there were just none available on the whole island. So the last time we had one for about 24 hours, we ended up being given this red postal van thing. So yeah, they might be in kind of short supply. So if sorting a hire car is a priority, you're going to want to do that early. Anyhow, like I said, no license, but had a plan. See, aside from the island of Hoy, which towers up high at the bottom of the Orkney island chain, Orkney is mostly kind of flat. You know, like it's pretty easy going, and hiring a bike seemed like an easy win. I mean, Orkney's not that big after all. So yeah, went to Cycle Orkney and off we go. Now, I don't own a GoPro, so I can't cycle and film, but that would hardly produce much riveting footage anyway, but Okay, so remember a few sentences ago when I said Orkney is kind of flat? Okay, well, that had been my impression of the place. This is, at best, an oversimplification, and my first target took me up a pretty sizable hill just outside Kirkwall that roundly defeated me. And look, I know it doesn't look like much. I mean, that was kind of my thought exactly, but you know how even just a small incline makes you work way harder? There's no escaping it. I'm going to be roasted by any cycling enthusiasts this episode. I persisted. A lovely older couple gave me a biscuit. And then round the hill a little, and here's the target. Wideford? Is it Wideford or like Widderford? Anyways, while this may superficially appear to be of the same stuff as the Grain Earth House, this is a Neolithic mound, and this would kick off a spree of these that I was itching to see on Orkney this trip. Not to confuse everyone too much, but these Neolithic passage graves, of which we'll be seeing a bunch, are about 5,000 years old, and we're pretty confident of their use as funerary structures, whereas Souterrain's closer to 2,000 years old. And yeah, we're very unclear on their function, even though we have a number of examples of them around the British Isles. It's not every day you go to a place with a huge entry hatch sign, and if I learned one thing from the series Lost, if I meet a crazed guy down there who insists I need to stay behind and keep pushing a button, I swear I am running away. I will let this island blow up in a very confusing Series 5 arc. I'll do it. It was also second time in the day that someone could have very easily trapped me in an ancient underground chamber. I was just taking it on faith that no one was going to get the drop on me and slam this hatch closed while I was down there. In fact, that nice older couple, I mean, oh my goodness, that biscuit might have been laden with a slow-acting nerve agent and... Nah, it's all right. I made it out without incident. But the real story of the trip, the clouds were clearing and blue skies were breaking in, and from the hill, it was affording us these unbelievable views across the islands. Last time at Orkney, there was a lot of mist, which does sap your mood after a while. You know, there's not much of a view. It's not that complicated, really. And of course, this far north, you just go with the understanding that cloud cover is the rule, sunshine the exception. But my goodness, does Scotland get special when you do get that sunshine? And this was going to transform this visit. It was time to get my Isaac Newton mandated reward for putting in all that effort getting up the hill, so freewheeled down it with the wind in my hair, not on camera, mind. And continuing west, my next target was the Queen chambered cairn, another Neolithic tomb. I realise we've been a bit light on details so far. You can see the walls are lined with these facing stones. They're all less than ideal to film in because, you know, dark. Queen and Widderford are both of the Maze How type of tomb. That's one of the most famous examples on the island, if you're unaware. Queen had the bodies of 8 individuals, but also 24 dogs. I mean, at least with these, they were dry enough to get on your knees and head in and explore. There is something delightfully childlike about crawling into one of these, because your adult self is very, it's a bit inconvenient, and like some dirt on my clothes, and your inner child is just like, wee, let's explore. There's also phenomenal views here over the Bay of Firth with the small islands of Damsey and the Holm of Grimbister. Well, onwards we go. So this was all brilliant, but it was taking longer than I'd expected. Remember when I said Orkney was quite flat? I also said it wasn't that big. Well, that turned out to be true in more of an Obi-Wan Kenobi, from a certain point of view kind of way. And yes, through the window of a car or bus, this all seems quite manageable. But when you're on a bike, what looked like a small archipelago from above sure does start to seem like a long way. This is where I changed my plans a bit of internally rejigging my original draft for the day. Having headed north along the eastern coast of mainland, arrived at the small harbour of Tingwall with little else around. There is this brock on the way in, but, well, I mean, it's not the easiest to make out from the ground. While waiting for the boat, I did have this rather fun conversation with a lady in her 70s. I feel like an idiot because while I asked her name, I promptly forgot it. But we were comparing places we'd been, and this legend was travelling alone, had pretty much just been doing an island a day. She seemed pretty completionist in what she was going for, and the weather had not been like this all week. It had apparently been raining and pretty cold while she was just casually crisscrossing the entire island chain. It was the sort of conversations I normally get in hostels, except in this case, someone decided to keep just representing way into her 70s. That's goals. I mean, what a hero. Anyway, boat pulls up and we're crossing the small stretch to Rousay. You know, you would think I'd gotten used to this by now since it is me writing the scripts, but it always blindsides us when we sit down and record one of these and it gets up to like half an hour. They take so long to edit. We just got off doing the Ravenna episode, which got really long because there was loads more from Italy to include. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to just trim off Rousay into a separate episode because there is just so much to cover there, and that's going to allow us a little more time to kind of go into some of the details. Well, returning to this afternoon, came off the ferry exhilarated but exhausted. Pushing the 10 or so miles around Rousay, including the ups and downs, absolutely battered me. But there was still more to do, so despite it now being early evening, pressed on. It was gorgeous here, and so cycling through the countryside was a real treat, minus the fatigue. On the last trip, not by design, but just the way things had worked out, I hadn't made it to any of Orkney's brocks. This was 2020. At that stage, I was mustard keen for the Neolithic already, but I just hadn't quite caught the brock bug just yet. So it was with considerable satisfaction that this time I was able to include the Brock of Gurness. If you saw the episode just before this on Shetland, which you should, you'd know that we were just fresh off catching what is probably the best example of a brock anywhere. By comparison, Gurness looks a little bit stumpy, but it's not just the brock itself. You can see the numerous other buildings radiating around it. The clear concentric banks of stone and turf are believed to predate the brock, the foundation of the site being somewhere between 500 to 200 BC. After 100 AD, the ditches were filled in, and we have later use into the 700s, generally described as a Pictish layer of occupation, with structures built atop the earlier ones. In fact, this later structure has been moved from atop the site to be put back together near the entrance. But just really great stuff. So that was Gurness, and I'm going to take this moment as an aside. A casual scroll back through the channel will demonstrate that we've been around a fairly large swath of Europe, whether it's various parts of Italy, Greece, Spain, or the Balkans, or going further into Anatolia, Morocco, and Jordan. We've covered a fair amount. But while that's been going on, we have been furiously crisscrossing ancient and medieval sites across the UK. It's just that these have not made it into episodes, at least not yet. Rather, we've been adding them to piles of what are eventually due to be these big series on various periods in history. And there's a lot here, whether it's Roman ruins in Britain, or Neolithic sites, or even ruined monastic sites, of which there are a shocking amount. Well, finally, we are kicking off one of these major series, and it's on the Iron Age in Britain, particularly through the lens of hill forts, though like the Brock of Gurness or Iron Age souterrains, there's lots of other bits to see. And okay, look, just have a look for a moment. So, at long last, we're going to be shading in more of what we've been doing around the UK these last, we're pretty much at 7 years we've been on this journey now. Well, the cycle back was during Golden Hour, or more like golden 3 hours with the time it takes for the sun to sink on Orkney in midsummer, it was inexplicably much less effort than the way out, which seems strange from a Newtonian perspective. I mean, we're pretty much at sea level as it is. It can't have all been downhill, but somehow it just felt like a lot less of a struggle than it had been on the way out. Just got to enjoy the open road and open sky. And hey, since I was passing it, there was time for just one last mysterious underground chamber for the day. This is the Renabista Earth House, and after a day of Neolithic structures, we're back to Iron Age souterrains. This one's surrounded by the Fence of Tetanus. Anyway, low-angle Orcadian flag shot. Don't see a lot of those. And then at long last, there was Kirkwall again. You know, for a town I'd only ever seen blanketed in grey, it was revelatory to see Kirkwall under blue skies, lit up as the sun got low. Well, got back to the hostel with quite the sense of satisfaction and absolutely filthy hands from all the times I had to fix the chain in the day. You know, that was something I've not done in years. Not looking forward to the dogpiling from actual cyclists if someone inputs how many miles I covered. You can just say it now. Yes, I am a worm. I used to cycle to and from school and around Chichester as a teen, so I just fully expected with a can-do attitude I'd be off around Orkney, no trouble. Well, there we go. Well, up pretty early, and yes, very early bus the next morning, pulling out of Kirkwall at 6 a.m. with what was already broad sunshine. Yeah, having cycled all of this yesterday, it was nice to have someone else doing the work this time, and this was an interesting mirror to my first time in Orkney. You know, once again, it was the crack of dawn, walking through the Orkney Neolithic landscape. Just like last time, the dew seeping into my trainers, but this time, rather than the subdued grey, the sunshine was glorious. I just felt so unbelievably lucky to be alive and be here on a day like today. And the 6 a.m. start did its job. No one around but the sheep. And revisiting old haunts, you know, the stones of Stoness, much taller than I'd remembered actually. Don't forget about the henge if you're there. Everyone's too busy looking at the stones and they forget about the ditch enclosure. It's kind of slight at Stoness nowadays, but it's still visible. And then across the bridge past the watchstone, and I dreamed of seeing Brodgar again, but under blue skies, and here it is. An absolute beauty, just such a privilege to photograph and experience. Yeah, most of the standing stones on Orkney are a lot thinner than they might appear if you're not seeing them in profile. They are imposing, but a lot less chunky than like an Avebury or maybe a Castle rig. Well, look, it feels like something poetic should go here, but I don't know what to tell you. I was just buzzing my boobs off. It's always a big journey getting to Brodgar. I guess I sort of assume that I'll get here again in my life, but there's no way to know that, and I may never get to see it on such a perfect, warm summer morning like this. So, deeply thankful, I guess, is the best way to describe it. I had to get back to Kirkwall to check out of the hostel and sort a couple of things. I didn't document all the backings and forthings this day, as it was a lot. Let's see. I did have a quick macchiato at Archive. 11 p.m. finish from 40 miles of cycling, followed by a 5 a.m. alarm. Probably could have used 10 of these, but onwards we go. Today's movements would have to be bus-based. The cycling had destroyed me. By the way, the cycling Orkney guy was incredibly gracious, feeling like a complete loser. I dropped the bike back a day early, and I didn't want to ask, but the dude just offered to refund me the second day. Now, please don't just assume that's a standard thing, but it was very kind of him to do that, just to be nice. So pretty much everyone has nothing but nice things to say about these guys, so yes, please show them some love. Okay, well, I was on a bus heading west to eventually get out to Stromness. Now, last time, I had struggled to find much nice to say about Stromness. It was pretty gloomy, but in the sunshine, it was a town transformed. I mean, see for yourself. Briefly popped into the museum to see this. This is the Buddo figurine, which may look like a haunted snowman, but it is rare to find human depictions from this early in the British Isles. A quick coffee from Julia's, then Buslink, and a chance to see the Unston Chambered Cairn, which just overlooks the Loch of Stoness and the Deepdale Standing Stone on the hill a short way above. From there, I headed back to Kirkwall, and while it feels like I'm narratively slamming the brakes on, that was almost me done. I got a drink or two to kill time in the evening, and at length, it was back onto the boat and onwards to Aberdeen. And hey, here's a tiny but awesome thing.
It's one of the great mysteries of antiquity. We have fragments of this account from a guy called Pythias, who is a 4th century Greek who, starting at Marseille, offers us the earliest written account of the British Isles. Now, we only have surviving fragments, and we don't know exactly how far north he got. But, rather charmingly, he described the northern extremity as the land of the midnight sun. Now, Orkney might get a little chilly, but the Arctic Circle it most certainly is not. But I couldn't help smile as, heading to the back of the boat, as midnight approached, there was still light on the horizon, and while this shot is a bit noisy, I had the chance to experience the land of the midnight sun for myself. Small coda to all this, woke up early doors in Aberdeen and had a great time meeting up with the Small Adventures guys. I've talked about them before, they're great, they showed me around a few spots in Aberdeen, and then later in the day I hopped on some trains and buses, saw Dunatar Castle and some stone circles. All great stuff, but not going to let this run too long. You know, I'm never sure which reaction I'll get first, either, oh, you're such an idiot for not seeing this, or, oh, you're such a jerk for trying to do too much. You know, I'm not some oligarch that can just randomly carve out 21-day expanses of time to see every single object in an area whilst also doing everything slowly. Hence, if we're going to do it, it has to be inexpensive and we have to make good time. That also explains why you haven't seen an Australia episode yet. You might have noticed that we don't have any interior shots of Maze Howe. That's because Historic Scotland will not allow pictures in there, which is spectacularly petty, especially when paired with the very high entry cost and limited entry times. But as to my experience, all the Orcadians I encountered were just lovely. The guys at Archive Coffee were brilliant, the girls at Judith Glue couldn't be nicer, the guy at Cycle Orkney was very generous, the guy at the youth hostel just warmly invited me to come and chill out in the evening if I wanted while I waited for the late ferry, even after I'd checked out. And while the sun was out, the atmosphere was incomparable. I mean, children out in the playing fields, people out smiling and chatting, even the cows in the field looked like they were playing and having a good time. Orkney still had its bluebells in full flower at least a month after they'd withered down south. So much as it hardly matters because they're not watching this anyway, but to anyone who inferred we were down on Orkney from the last episodes, there's your love letter to the island, since we could of course never leave something simply implied. So if you've enjoyed the music in this episode, you can catch it on bandcamp.com, and if you want to support us at the channel, that's the place to do it. As we mentioned in the middle, we've got our Hill Fort series starting very soon, just rushing to get some of the last details together as that goes out. So please subscribe so you can catch that when it comes out, otherwise we'll catch you very soon.